Wake up in the morning, I just gotta get it. Wake up in the morning, I just gotta get it.
All right, welcome everyone to the Schoology Learning podcast. Thanks for joining us. This is the podcast where we talk about some things we're hearing out in the world about education, as well as some tips and tricks about our favorite platform, which is, of course, Schoology. My name is Kellie Adie, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ericka Waterman.
Hey, Kelly. I'm so excited for us to take this time. I just remember how fun it was when I was teaching to take the lunchtime or, any little break that we had and just kind of talk with colleagues. So hopefully everyone can join us and just get a little chit chat about education and Schoology while they're at it.
Yeah, so let's get started. Okay. Eric, I have so many things in my head right now to tell you about, but it's funny because I literally just saw you in person, which is we haven't had a chance to do very often. In fact, this was our first, wasn't this the first time we've ever met in person?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's very different than over Zoom. Very different experience.
The funny thing is, you and I had talked about how when you're used to seeing people on Zoom and then you see them in person, I don't know what there is, but there is a disconnect. So, and of course, nobody can see us talking right now, but for those who are listening, imagine, if you will, that I wear glasses every time that I work on the computer. So I have like reading glasses that I use, and it's got the blue light filter or whatever that I think is a marketing ploy, but whatever, I bought it. So Eric and I just talked about this. We're at an event in Colorado, and and we talked about how people look different and whatever. And I really threw Ericka for a loop because not only was I not wearing glasses, but I also had my hair in a ponytail, which I never wear at work. And also
never see
ever. Also, a lot of women get away with like the cute, messy ponytail or like, no, mine was like, I've given up. Mine was the I've given up ponytail because I was tired from travel. So anyway, so Eric,
look, just
so Ericka walks in, and sure enough, literally walks to where I'm sitting and is like looking around.
I looked everywhere to the point that someone from the establishment came over and asked if I needed help because I was like scouring this place. I'm sure I looked super creepy looking around. And when I explained to the gentleman that I was looking for my friend, that's when Kellie spoke up and was like, I'm right here. Like, could have touched her, you all. That's how close she was to me. And I looked right past her. So embarrassing.
And I did warn Ericka that I'm shorter than she would think. So I knew you were looking down, like you were looking like, just not right. Yeah.
But not that close. Oh my gosh. It was so funny.
But it was so fun to get to see you in person. And
once I found you, it was fantastic.
But part of the reason I was in the I've given up ponytail was the week before last, I actually got to participate in an international event, and some things came up out of that I thought were really interesting that I just kind of wanted to share today. Because one of the things we talked about in Colorado was obviously like AI literacy and like where people are in terms of where they are in their AI journey with staff and students. And there was just really interesting disconnect between the research community at this event, and this would be like folks in higher ed that are trying to wrap their heads around what impact does AI have on teaching and learning. And then we've got like these ministers of education who have these, very like 30,000 foot view of like how this is going to work with AI for their country, right? So large scale. And then you've got like this faction of like practitioners who are sharing what they're actually doing. And it was just sort of an interesting mix of perspectives where you've got the research world saying, whoa, we don't have enough data and research on how this actually impacts teaching and learning to jump into this whole hog, like we should take a very measured approach to this. And then you've got the other side where they're like, this could do so many amazing things for personalizing learning and like the potential that's there. So it was just, I guess it kind of brought back home to me that all the things we talk about here are really just global issues that everyone is dealing with. So everyone's asking about, like, do we have cognitive impacts that are negative because kids start to offload stuff that they shouldn't be offloading? And everyone's worried about academic integrity. And it was just really, it was, kind of fascinating. So I don't know. I don't know if you heard that at Connect Colorado, which is where we were last week, but I definitely heard it at the event that I was at the week before, which is where
Yeah, I feel like a lot of just trends in education in general. A lot of it is people going like, what should I do? Does anybody know what we should do? What should
Yeah.
we do?
Yeah.
It's a blend of just people going like, does anybody have any idea?
Does this work for anyone? Just anyone.
Right?
Yeah.
Anybody got anything going
Yeah.
that's working? And then it's those people who are like, I'm going to start something. We're doing this, and this is how we're going to proceed forward. And, you definitely, I can see both sides, right? I'm one of those people who I'm like, let's just go for a solution. Let's do something. Let's, have at it. Give it a go. If it doesn't work, we'll pivot, right? We'll do something different.
Yeah.
And then, but I can totally see the other side of, hey, let's make sure, is anybody doing this really successfully? Is there anybody who actually like I can point to and say, yes, we should mimic that. And I think that's really tough, even when people can prove that things are going to be beneficial. Like, yes, this is research based. Yes, this is proven. This is what you should be implementing into your school district. School districts are so unique. It just sometimes becomes but we can't really do that here because of X, Y, and Z, or at least that's what is presented right away.
Yeah, well, that's actually a great point. One of the things that came out of the international event was how few randomized control trials we have to like really evaluate whether or not, like, what's the impact of X on this group of kids. But I remember reading this book way back in the day called When Can You Trust the Experts? It's from Dr. Danny Willingham out of UVA. And he made this great analogy about how a lot of research is very much like a pendulum, where you can create this perfect pendulum and it works exactly the way you need it to. And then you take it on a ship and nothing works. And his point was, research is so highly contextualized that like what works for one district or one learning organization for this one specific goal with this one specific set of students doesn't always translate to like a global, like, this works, but at least it's something where you're like, well, at least I know the conditions under which the research occurred.
So you can, if it works for you, try and mimic it as much as you can.
And modify like, okay, well, this won't work. And a lot of the data that I saw was around math. And I think when you look at math and students with AI, that's already sort of a question mark because of the inability that generative AI has with dealing with math really well. Like, that's sort of been an ongoing challenge. I know we're working on that, but that's
constantly getting better, right? But it is, it is there is a limited factor there for sure.
Yeah. So back to the Colorado Connect event. What were your takeaways? Like, I mean, you did a session and you sort of had to step in for a session. Really?
Yeah. I've learned in this role, you're just like, what do you need me to be and where? And I will do it. That definitely happens a lot. It's always great to be in the presence of customers. Like, I try to do a lot of customer calls. I try to have a lot of avenues to get customer feedback because it is important, right? As we're developing Schoology, I need as much input from the actual users as possible. And so anytime I get a chance to go on site and talk with people directly, it's amazing. For example, there's something that I think we could all agree on, research aside, I think we can all agree is needed, is more transparency for parents and students to understand what their kids are actually learning and what that means, right? Like, it's one thing to say, oh, you have an A in English, cool. I actually don't know what that means that you learned. And if you go online and you look at the, curriculum app, for example, sometimes parents are like, okay, but what does that mean? Like, what does this refer to? And what does it mean that my student can actually do? So I got a chance to show off an idea I had of taking those grades or rankings or marks or rubric scores, however you want to think about
Yeah.
it. But taking what the actual standard or the content was, and then allowing districts to actually explain, like, this is what this means. This means that your student is at grade level, above grade level, below grade level, or whatever the terminology would be most appropriate for the school district.
Yeah.
And then also, here's what they can do to improve. Here's what's next. And just the power of being able to provide that visibility all within the same place that they're viewing their students' grades, right? So not having reference material separate from that, but all within it. And it really, really was well received. I got a lot of compliments on the concept.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone that has a 1 to 4 scale or whatever scale that people are choosing, there's
Yep.
always language attached that's like, what does the 3 mean? And at least that makes it a little demystified, because if you are just thinking straight up numbers and you see a 3 out of 4 as a parent, like, you're kind of wired to think, well, that's a 3 out of 4 is
Well,
not great.
not
That's like
great. Yeah, that's a C, right? In
75%.
our
Yeah.
heads. Yeah, exactly.
However, I mean, when I think about where we are with people who are now going to become parents in the next, let's say, 10 years, the chances of some of those folks being exposed to some kind of standards aligned instruction is now pretty high.
That's a really good point.
It
Yep.
happens in elementary a lot. Now we tend to phase out of that approach at secondary, although I think that even that's changing. But
Agreed.
it'll
Yep.
be interesting to see, like, when we have a parent community that has a little bit more savvy in terms of like what it means to have a standard grade versus a holistic grade, a cumulative grade.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because even I look at my parents and what they expected from a report card versus what I expected from my kids' report card, right? And now when you're right, each generation, I think, kind of is more apt to be understanding of changes that occur with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
for
one
sure.
thing I've always loved about, so, Schoology has there's like, the 2 different mastery options. There's district
Yeah.
mastery, which takes some setup and some work to get going. And actually, I think our team needs to actually enable it.
Yep.
Versus what comes out of the box, which I'm never sure what to call it. I called it legacy mastery. I've called it teacher mastery. Like, I don't know.
I
Out of the
use
box,
legacy mastery. Yeah.
but there's so many great little gems of info in that legacy mastery report. And one of the things, and you brought this up actually when you were showing student item analysis in Performance Matters, is seeing the number of times something has been assessed against a standard. So in that legacy mastery, that little number tells you how many times that standard's been attached in the report. For district masteries never provided that, which I always thought was pretty, like, that's kind of a big deal to not have.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Because you need to know whether, have you just assessed it once?
Right.
Have you assessed it 5 times?
Yeah.
Have you have you done 20 things
Right.
with just this one standard and have ignored these other ones? It's all a really important piece of the information. So yeah, it's truly making sure that people have the right information so that they are communicating well, but then also the right information to make sure that they're instructing and assessing this correctly as well too. Yeah.
Right.
A little bit of both.
Yeah. Well, I know that I did a PowerBuddy for learning session. And it was interesting because there was a lot of people in the room that were from a district that had been piloting it and they turned it on. And so there was some familiarity. And then there was like the other side of the spectrum, people that had never seen it before. And, we gave them a chance to play in the sandbox for a little bit.
I love that you did that. That was so great.
Yeah, my only problem was, and this is just my fault, is not checking the session time. I thought it was an hour. Nope, it was not. It was 45 minutes. Yeah.
I
So
ran out of time
it ran-
also.
yep,
I was like,
very-
oh, I'm so
yeah.
used to an hour.
Yeah, and I knew the next session was starting at the hour mark. So I guess that's what I had in my head. But anyway, so, but it's always good also to hear the feedback. And I heard so many people, and we've talked about this before, we're like, Oh, I saw this before and it didn't have any of this. Like this is, in fact, I was even on site with LA Unified the day before I came out to Colorado, and they were saying like, wow, this is a really, really different, this is a very, very different product than what you showed us, 6 months
Yeah.
ago, whatever.
And that's something that I hope I definitely want them to know that about PowerBuddy for Learning, that it is evolving constantly and it's getting like,
Yeah,
they're just adding so much nice little perks to that part of the product, which is great.
yeah, yeah.
But I want that to be known for Schoology too, just Schoology wide, that we're constantly adding those things, making
Yeah.
things, just more beneficial. But
Yeah.
I did, the only downside to meeting with customers face to face
Yeah.
is that they get so excited to talk to me because they're like, you can actually make things happen in the
Oh,
product,
you're
right?
the person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
They get,
Yeah.
as soon as that word spreads, a lot of people come up to me and, they will ask sometimes for things that are super important. I get that they're important. I can completely understand where they're coming from, but it'll be something so specific to them.
Yeah.
And so I have to find sometimes ways to gently say, I understand, but it's probably not going to be something that we can do because this is so specific to you.
Yeah.
And there's, and everyone always responds the same way. They're like, no, everybody does it this way. And I'm like, you know what? They don't.
Yeah.
It kind of ties back to what you were saying earlier, right? We do all this research, we come up with all like, this is how it should be. And then you realize that like they all have their own little twist on things, right?
Yeah.
Which is, the same thing with that PowerBuddy for Learning session that you did, that I got to witness, and it was great. But everybody just kind of like, oh, we hadn't used that part yet, or I hadn't seen that part yet, or I hadn't thought to use it in this way. And it's because everybody just approaches things a little bit differently in all our school districts. And it makes it a bit of a challenge, a fun challenge. I love this challenge of how do we develop PowerBuddy for Learning? How do we develop Schoology in a way that's going to be most impactful for the broadest
Yeah.
spectrum of school districts that we can?
Yeah. It's funny how often you hear somebody say like, well, what is everybody else doing? And then you'll hear from them, they'll say like, oh, well, that won't work where I am.
Yeah.
Right. Like it won't, but you're asking like,
It's
what is
good.
everyone else doing?
And it's like, no, they typically do this. And they're like, oh, well, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know, but that is what everybody else is doing. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And
Well,
it doesn't make anybody right, doesn't make anybody wrong. It's crazy how unique each school district is.
yeah, and I think sometimes, in some ways, and I wish I didn't do my due diligence during either of my sessions to point out the Schoology toolbox. And I was thinking about how that the whole idea of the ideas portal sort of gives you an indication of how often are people doing this. Like if you go on and you search for something where you're like, I kind of wish it did this, and you do a search and there's nothing that no one has put up there. It might
Yes.
be maybe no one's logged it, but then there's others you probably like, oh, a lot of people have already mentioned this. So that is a broader, I don't know if that solves the problem, but
It does help it though, because we definitely look at those things. So for
yeah,
example, hopefully by the time this episode airs, the flags will persist in the gradebook, which has
oh,
been
yes.
a massive request.
Yeah.
And we saw that over and over and over by districts, large, small, didn't matter where they were. Everybody wanted the flags to persist after grading. And so it was like that. We're going to go after this. It was a bigger task, but it was worth doing because I knew it was going to have a broad impact. Versus to your point, there's times where I'm like, that's a really great idea, but you're the only district who is using it in that way. And so unfortunately, there's a lot of districts that are using Schoology, and I want to make sure we're doing things as beneficial for the whole as we can.
Yeah. I know if I were to go full on Star Trek, I would quote
Please
Spock
do.
from the Wrath of Khan.
Okay.
But anyway, it's a very, very sad part of the movie, but it's like this whole idea of the good of the many far outweighs the needs of the few or the one, where it's like, what are the needs of the many? And it's opportunity cost, and it's a painful one sometimes, but it's just the
It's
reality.
devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately I want it to be where it doesn't matter where these students live,
Yeah,
what school they go to, what teacher they have, that they all have these opportunities. You know, like that's ultimately what I'd love to have happen. But I can only do so much, right? And so you just try to make it the best you can.
Okay, but quick note though, speaking of the needs of the many, when I was setting up that sandbox, I had to test whether or not what I thought should work was going to work. And I got to use Impersonate. And I was like so excited. I was like, oh, finally, like that was a long standing request. And it worked so well, I have to tell you. It was
so awesome. We have been getting so much feedback on that. That has been insanely positive. People are like, oh my gosh, this works so well. Game changer. Super helpful. So that's great to hear, Kelly. I'm glad that it worked out for you.
Yes, very
but
excited.
yes, you're right. Long time coming for that one.
Long time,
but again, a very popular idea. It was one that had tons of requests, tons of votes.
Needs of the many for sure.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it's not too long before you and I get to hang out in person again. But
yeah, it was wonderful.
Great.
I promise to recognize you right away next time, Kelly. Ponytail.
I'll warn you too. I'll like wear something that's very like obviously me. And so well, anyway, it was great to see you. And looking forward to the next time we can connect with customers. It's always good.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining this episode of the Schoology Learning podcast. Hope to see you next time where we'll talk about some more topics of interest and, of course, talking about our favorite platform, Schoology.
And in the meantime, if you click on the user toolbox at the bottom of the Schoology page, there are lots of resources out there, including other episodes of this podcast to listen to. Until next time.
And hope to see you next time. Thanks all.